Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Plotlines. I'm your host, Connor, and I wanted to talk about sort of the two big, maybe driving ideologies of the modern day, going all the way back since globalism in some ways stemmed from liberalism, and then nationalism started with Napoleon. And they both kind of bursted onto the scene when the French Revolution was exported all across Europe and in some ways all across the world. And so one of the biggest sort of conferences of conservatives, or sorry, conservatives. I don't know why I had trouble with that. Uh, it has called itself the National Conservatism Conference. And I want to go through what it says, what their principles are, and I want to see if they're mistaken on the word that they should be using to describe their organization, or are they actually nationalists in some capacity? And first of all, both, in my opinion, both globalism and nationalism stem from uh, correct instincts, but they both go the wrong way. They both are basically problems. So liberalism stems from a more Protestant perspective, and I think nationalism is kind of a combo. Nationalism, you can direct any ideology you want with nationalism, because if you're directing the state or the nation in a certain direction, you could do that in a liberal way. You can do that in a socialist or Marxist way, and but you can't, and you can do that in a socialist way, but you can't really do that with a Catholic way, and that's because Catholicism recognizes that when you're Catholic, you are a part of a bigger world. You are not just merely part of a nation, you are part of something bigger. And a nation basically says the only thing that I am valuing for the most part is the nation in which I reside. And nationalism also is a perversion of patriotism. Patriotism is love of one's country, while nationalism is basically considering the nation you are born in, or the nation that you have chosen for yourself, depending on how you determine who's part of a nation, is supposed to be dominant, and nobody else should be consulted, nobody else's concerns should be merited. Now, what we think of globalism, we think of sort of the what is it, the message, the Marxism being spread all across the globe. And that's one of the reasons why instinctually a lot of people on the right say, okay, I don't want to be a member of this group, I don't want to be connected with um globalism, I don't want to think of things on a global scale. And of course, these people are right insofar as we need to look inward at our societies first, and then we can help others, because you can't help others without helping yourself, without first being, of helped yourself. Just as a father can't look out to help the community if his family is completely destroyed, if he's raised his children improperly, if his wife is in a bad situation, he needs to protect them, and he needs to guide them correctly, in order then once he has a stable home, he can then help others. Now, thank you all for watching, and like, share, comment, and subscribe. And then I'm going to go through these principles. I'm going to just read the statement of principles by this conference, and we're going to see what they really believe. And I'm going to try and determine at the end, is this nationalism? Is this poor wording? Do they just mean something else? What do they mean? I think that's one of the things that we often don't fully grasp our with the people we're dealing with. What do they really mean? And since so many people are very poorly educated, let's figure out what they mean. Obviously, these people should know what they mean because they are highly educated. Okay. So I don't know if this conference, a lot of interesting speakers spoke at it. It was in England or the UK. Recently, it was in the United States the year before. So let's get into this. National Conservatism, a Statement of Principles. The following statement was drafted by Will Chamberlain, who I think is a journalist, Christopher Demuth. I don't know who that is. Rod Dreyer is, I think he was a Catholic and he became Orthodox. Yoram Hazani is a Jewish scholar or Jewish philosopher or something like that. Daniel McCarthy, Joshua Mitchell, and his Lions, John O'Sullivan, and R.R. Reno on behalf of the Edmund Burke Foundation, which we've discussed. Edmund Burke is he's not really, I mean, he's conservative, but conservatism is basically liberalism. So I'm very cautious about basically anything with Burke. Not insofar, I mean, obviously he recognized something bad in the French Revolution. He should be commended for that, but that's kind of basic. So you shouldn't be surprised. The statement reflects a distinctly Western point of view. However, we look forward to future discourse and collaboration with movements akin to our own in India, Japan, and other non-Western nations. Signatories' institutional affiliations are included for identification purposes only and do not imply an endorsement on the part of any institution other than the Edmund Burke Foundation. Also, what's interesting to me about this is, they are sort of opening it up to a lot of different groups. So is this really nationalism, or is this just a sort of form? I don't know. It seems like they're not trying to push themselves over other nations. So that's what makes it confusing when they use the term nationalism or national, I guess. They don't say nationalism, so I guess maybe they're not nationalists, but national and nationalism is pretty close. So I don't know. If you're going to use this terminology, I don't know, I'd be a little more cautious. We are citizens of Western nations. We have watched with alarm as the traditional beliefs, institutions, and liberties underpinning life in the countries we love have been progressively undermined and overthrown. Also, just a reminder that a lot of these people who wrote or who signed off on this aren't part of the same country, which is kind of interesting. So, we see the traditions of independent, self-governed nations as the foundation for restoring a proper public orientation towards patriotism, good, and courage, good, honor, good, and loyalty, that's good, religion and wisdom, good, but to be fair, they're not going to be saying a specific religion, of course. They can't say that because they don't have it's there's multiple different religious people a part of this organization, so they can't say the truth. They can't go towards the truth. They can't move towards the Catholic faith in that manner. But religion as a whole, they're at least open to that, and that's but to be fair, a lot of liberals have been open to religion for personal use. That's what happens with religion under liberalism. It becomes a private affair. So if this means religion becoming a public affair, that might be a little different, but I don't think it does. Congregation and family, man and woman, the Sabbath and the sacred, I it's annoying that they say Sabbath because Sunday is the Lord's day and Saturday is the Sabbath, is the Jewish Sabbath. So I think that's um this is what I don't one of the things I don't like about like Judeo-Christian values is when it comes to, in my opinion, what I see is Christianity is the correct interpretation of Judaism as seen in the Bible. But obviously, the Jewish faith is not the fullness of religion. So, therefore, uh, the current Judaism, it has to be off, has to be not full. So, if Judaism and Christianity are working together, that could confuse some things. Um, so, yeah, and reason and justice. Most of that's pretty good. They recognize man and woman different. We are conservatives because we see such virtues as essential to sustaining our civilization. We see such a restoration as a prerequisite for covering and maintaining our freedom, security, and prosperity. I do like the word restoration. I've part of me thinks that a political ideology we could sort of come around maybe is restorationism. That might be the only that might be a good one. I still need to figure out what we're gonna call something of our from our own terms, because like a lot of people call people reactionaries, which I don't think a political ideology or a political way of thinking should be just in response to events or um you know political opponents. It should be its own thing. It should be coming from the people. It's kind of like capitalism is named that because that's what the Marxists called it. So we emphasize the idea of the nation because we see a world of independent nations, each pursuing its own national interests and upholding national traditions that are its own. Now, nation is different from country. They're not the same thing. I wish they might replace nation or national or with I mean, yeah, if they would take away national and put country, because each country has its own traditions of government. So uh, that's more of what they're trying to say, but I think they're doing it in the wrong way. Now, the one problem is if you don't see this world as sort of basically, if you don't see that there is a universalist perspective, like like from a Catholic perspective, you need a universalist perspective because Catholicism is universal. So therefore, the principles of Catholicism are universal, but there are a lot of things within Catholicism that sort of can be not molded, but like can be put on a civilization, and then that civilization has its own traditions as well, and that can be baptized into Christianity. So that's not destroying heritage necessarily. That's just directing the cultures and customs of a group of a country towards the Catholic faith and towards truth. Um, anyways, upholding national traditions that are its own. So the tradition element's good. The as the only genuine alternative to universalist ideologies now seeking to impose a homogenizing locality, destroying imperium over the entire globe. That's, again, it's Catholicism is not locality destroying, and in some ways it's homogenizing, but it's not in the same way as Marxism does, and not the same way as globalism does. So that's my thing. So a universalized worldview does not inherently mean that it does not inherently mean that that it is locality destroying. Now, I think this is more thinking of the economics of it. Drawing on this heritage, we therefore affirm the following principles. National independence. We wish to see a world of independent nations, each capable of self-government, should chart its own course in accordance with its own particular constitutional, linguistic, and religious inheritance. Each has the right to maintain its own borders and conduct policies that will benefit its own people. We endorse a policy of rearmament by independent, self-governing nations and of defensive alliances whose purpose is to deter imperialist aggression. So, the one thing about nationalism, and this is also with liberalism, nationalism basically says that only only somebody within the nation can affect or should affect the country or affect the people only from within, and that there can't be anything affecting from without. And of course, God is without, so it doesn't recognize the universalism of God, as well as the Catholic faith, which is a universal faith, and the Pope is its head, is its vicar for. I mean, Jesus is the head, and then the Pope is the vicar, and the Pope needs to govern the church, which inherently is an influence on a country from without. So that's one of the dangers with Catholics taking nationalistic perspectives. Rejection of imperialism and globalism. We support a system of free, cooperation and competition among nation states, which again also this makes me think that also each nation states used to mean that there would have to be one ethnicity or one nation, and so you can't have a country made up of multiple different ethnicities, and that can be dangerous if it's taken in the wrong way, obviously. And so, I mean, that's what broke up Austria-Hungary. I mean, that's what eventually led. Again, this is far off from what they're talking about, and this isn't necessarily this doesn't necessarily mean that they're going that way, but it's how the Nazis got to where they got to. Just saying. If it's not if it's obviously if it's connected with some kind of Darwinism and social Darwinism, of course, but it does recognize everyone as anyways. So we'll get into that. There are some things that obviously would stop people from acting that way and what their principles are, but I'm not sure if their principles are not a little contradictory in some ways. Working together through trade treaties, defensive alliances, and other common projects that respect the independence of all their members. But we oppose transferring the authority of elected governments to transnational or supranational bodies, a trend that pretends to high moral legitimacy even as it weakens representative government. I don't really care necessarily about representative government, of course. Sows public alienation and distrust and strengthens the influence of autocratic regimes. Accordingly, we reject imperialism in various contemporary forms. We condemn the imperialism of China, Russia, and other authoritarian powers. We also oppose the liberal imperialism of the latest generation. That is, Well, liberalism, imperialism is basically taking tries to take away morality, sort of principles of a people in order to make them the same and sort of to make them like each other, I guess. Take away any uniqueness of belief or principles that don't fit with the current belief system, which obviously is very dangerous. And then Marxism is basically putting on that putting those Marxist beliefs, then sewing them into different countries across the globe, which has kind of in the last 10 years has become part of what the United States empire is. Um, which sought to gain power, influence, and wealth by dominating on nations and trying to remake them in their own image. Like I said, that's what liberalism is. And that's what Marxism has also become or has added to it. Third, national government. The independent nation state is instituted to establish a more perfect union among the diverse communities or parties and regions of a given nation. See, that's not what a nation state is. That's just a country. I don't think this is why it's confusing. I think if they're using this language, they're going to confuse people, and they should just I think there's probably a better terminology for this. So hopefully they might be willing to change that. But I I support insofar as nations having a level of able to have diverse communities. And I don't mean the diversity of today. I mean diversity as in like cultures um and way of life, and not trying to make everyone uniform, which really lessens the beauty of the world to have everyone act exactly the same way. Of course, morals should be maintained, but that's a different thing. To provide for their common defense and justice among them, and to secure the general welfare and blessings of liberty for this time and for future generations. We believe in a strong but limited state. It's interesting. Subject to a constitutional restraints and division of powers. So the United States government, which I don't know, it's debatable whether it's useful. We recommend a drastic reduction in the scope of the administrative state. True, that's good. And the policy-making judiciary that displaced legislatures representing the full range of national interests and values. I don't find legislatures that promulgate things. I don't find them that impressive, so I don't really care that much about that. We recommend the Federalist Principle, which describes a delegation of power to respective states or subdivisions of the nation so as to allow greater variation, experimentation, and freedom. However, in those states of subdivision in which law and justice have manifestly corrupted, or which lawlessness, immorality, and dissolution reign, national government must intervene energetically to restore order. I guess I don't have a problem with that. God and public life or public religion. No nation can long endure without humility and gratitude before God and fear of his judgment that are found in authentic religious tradition. For millennia, the Bible has been the surest guide, nourishing a fitting orientation towards God, which, I mean, the Catholic Church is the answer to this question. To the political traditions of the nation, to public morals, to the defense of the weak, and to the recognition of things rightly regarded as sacred. The Bible should be read at the first among the sources of shared Western civilization. You mean Christendom? Western civilization is just a fake terminology in schools and universities, and the rightful inheritance of believers and non-believers alike, where a Christian Christian majority exists. Public life should be rooted in Christianity and its moral vision, which would be honored by the state and other institutions, both public and private. At the same time, Jews and other religious minorities are to be protected in observance of their own traditions, in the free governance of their communal institutions, in all matters pertaining to rearing and education of their children. Adult individuals should be protected from religious or ideological coercion in their private lives and in their homes. Anyways, the rule of law. We believe in the rule of law. To be honest, I don't really think I need to discuss this part. Free enterprise is pretty self-explanatory. Just basically how it all comes back. Public research. I don't know what this one is at all. At a time when China is rapidly overtaking America and the Western nations in fields crucial for security and defense. A Cold War type program modeled on DARPA, the Moonshot, and SDI is needed to focus large-scale public resources on scientific and technological research with military applications, on restoring and upgrading national manufacturing capacity, and on education, on physical sciences and engineering. On the other hand, we recognize that most universities are at this point partisan and globalist in orientation and vehemently opposed to nationalist and conservative ideas. Such institutions do not deserve taxpayer support unless they redirect themselves to national interest. Educational policy should serve manifest national needs. Really, the institutions shouldn't get any money until they are searching for truth. That's purely it. Family and children. We believe that traditional family is the source of society's virtues and deserves greater support from public policy. The traditional family, built around a lifelong bond between a man and a woman, on a lifelong bond and a lifelong bond between parents and children, is the foundation of all achievements of our civilization. The disintegration of the family, including a marked decline in marriage and childbirth, gravely threatens the well-being and sustainability of democratic nations, which I don't care about democratic nations. Among the causes are the unconstrained individualism that regards children as burden, while encouraging ever more radical terms of sexual license and experimentation as a alternative to the responsibilities of family and congregational life. Economic and cultural conditions that foster stable and congregational life and child raising are the priorities of the highest order. Yeah, pretty much for the most part, this is accurate, other than my minor critique. Immigration has made immense contributions to the strength and prosperity of Western nations, but today's penchant for uncontrolled and unassimilated immigration has become a source of weakness and instability, not strength and dynamism, threatening internal dissension and ultimately dissolution of the political community. We note that Western nations have benefited from both liberal and restrictive immigration policies of various times. We call for much more restrictive policies until these countries summon the wit to establish a more balanced, productive, and assimilationist policies. Restrictive policies may sometimes include a moratorium on immigration. No problem with that. I think we should put a kibosh on immigration at the moment. Race. We believe that all men are created in the image of God, and that public policy should reflect that fact. No person's worth or loyalties can be judged by the shape of his features, the color of his skin, or the results of a lab test, whatever. The history of racialist ideology and oppression and its ongoing consequences require us to emphasize this truth. We condemn the use of state and private institutions to discriminate and divide us against one another on the basis of race. The cultural sympathies encouraged by a decent nationalism offer a sound basis for conciliation and unity among diverse communities. The nationalism we espouse respects and indeed combines the unique needs of particular minority communities and common good of the nation as a whole. Okay, so that's that. Now, I'm gonna sort of give my take on whether or not this is really nationalism, because this is the thing, is like, why did they use this term? They could have used any other term. And I have I have respect for a lot of those people who are were part of this conference. Dr. Sebastian Morello is a great Catholic philosopher that I respect highly, who spoke at the conference recently, and I hope he'll be on the podcast someday. Unless and until this group defines who they think God is. Yep, that's the problem. They don't have a firm understanding of what religion is. That's for sure. Is their proposals could easily support state-sponsored human sacrifice. Yes, that's true. Nationalism is inherently a pagan ideology, so I'm not surprised about that. I think they need to have a really truly coherent view of the world. You have to be speaking from a certain religion, and of course, Catholicism is that avenue, is that place we need to look towards. So there's a lot of concerns about this, but I do think that most of the principles that they espouse are good. I think they fall into a lot of the same democratic belief systems that I guess you shouldn't expect them to be very different at the moment. This is, still very much the perspective of the elites at the moment, and I'm not really surprised that they're unwilling to have true principles. So, of course, all of what I talked about here, all this, like, what I read was this sort of national conservatism principles, and those aren't necessarily my principles, as a lot of the stuff I just did was critique them. So I hope that was useful. If ever, I'd love to hear people's perspectives on what I got right and what I got wrong in your opinion. Let me know in the comments. But I think they're like half nationalists. So I don't really know where they're going with that. So I just think they should I think if they use patriotic conservatism or something like that. Of course, conservatism, as I've discussed, is liberal and is a problem unto itself. So that's where I would say that they have some incoherence, at least, with what they believe nationalism is. And of course, they condemn a very belligerent, evil version of nationalism, by recognizing that every man and woman is made in the image of God and has natural rights. So there you go. That's an important factor that really, at least, that lowers them to a certain level of nationalism. There's another type of nationalism which they seem to state, but they're very fond of the nation state, but also they define the nation state poorly, in my opinion. So that's what I got to say on that. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Let me know what you think of the episode in the comments, and have a blessed day. Bye.